So today you're learning how to solve quadratic equations by factoring. And remember last week you learned how to solve them by graphing. So when you're solving them by factoring, so you're going to use what's called the zero product rule. So this says if the product of two real numbers is zero, then at least one of the numbers in the product or the factors must be zero. So pretty much if A B equals zero, because if if you multiply to get zero, either A would have to be zero here or B would have to be zero. So pretty much you're gonna, which is what it says here. So you're gonna use the zero product rule to figure out what your solutions would be for your quadratic. So this is just another method. So you can also graph them like you learned before, although the one downside of the graphing is that so sometimes it will cross at a whole number on your x-axis, but sometimes it was between two numbers. So factoring is another method, and you'll learn another method later this week. So for the first one here, so this is pretty much already factored for you. So you know that the product of these two terms multiplies to give you zero here. So it's x times x minus 12 equals zero, which means either x would have to equal to zero here, or I'm going to use different colors, or your other one would be equal to zero. So we're going to set each one to zero here. So you can set your first factor equal to zero, which is just x here. So you'd have x equals zero for the green part there. And then you'll have to set your other factor equal to zero. So you have x minus 12. So you'll have this one here for your other answer. So you'll have x minus 12 equals zero then. And then you're gonna, this equation x equals zero is already solved for you, but then you can solve this one for x here. So you can just add 12 to get your solution there. So when you add 12 to zero, so you'll have 12 then. So you have x equals 12 for that one then. So that means the two zeros or solutions to this one would be 0 and then 12. That means if you were to graph it, if you were to graph the quadratic, that means it would cross in two places. So if you were to graph it, so you know that it will cross at 0 here and then at 12. So it might look something like this or whatever, because it will cross at 0 and then way down here at 12. So that's pretty much what you're finding there. And then for the next one here, you see you have x squared minus x minus 56 equals 0. So for these, like when you're graphing the quadratics, you want to make sure all your terms are on the same side first. Which means for this one, so these are on the same side. You don't have to move anything over. And this isn't factored yet. So you're going to have to factor it so you can't use the zero product rule. So you're going to factor, it's a trinomial here because you have three terms. Which remember for the trinomials, that's when you're doing A times C here. So you'll do 56 times 1. Do you know any factors of 56 then? Sorry, factors of negative 56, so it would add to give you negative 1 then. So the factors, so you need a positive and a negative. You're trying to multiply or to add to be negative 1 here. So you'll have to use negative 8 and 7. And then remember, if the coefficient of your x squared term is 1, you can use the shortcut. So since the coefficient of your x squared is 1 here, you can use the shortcut. So you can just sub them right in. Or you can do it the long way, but I'm just going to do it the short way here. So one of your factors would be x minus 8. That's because one of these is negative 8. And then your other would be positive 7. So x plus 7 then. So we factored this trinomial here, and then like this one here, you'll have to set each of your factors equal to 0. So you'll have to set your first one equal to 0. So your first one is x minus 8. So you'll do x minus 8 equals 0 for the first one. And then you'll have your other one there too. So then you have this one. So x plus 7 equals 0. And then you'll just solve each of these to figure out what your solutions would be then. So for this one, so you can add your 8 then. So that would be x equals 8 for your first solution, or 0. And then you can solve your second equation here. So you're solving x plus 7 equals 0. So you'll subtract 7 then. So your second solution would be x equals -7. And these would be your two solutions there then. So that's where your graph crosses your x-axis then at those 2 points. And then for the next ones, remember all your terms have to be on the same side. So these are, you have 0 there, so that's good. You have two terms here. If you only have two terms, so it's not like a trinomial, it's not like the one we just did. You can't do a times c here. So if you have two terms, so sometimes you can do is factor out GCF, and sometimes it'll be a difference of squares. So for this one, you have 5s and then -2s squared. So the 5s, that's not a perfect square, and the 2 isn't either. S squared is. So I'd see if there's a GCF you can factor out from each of these two terms. So it's 5 and 2, which means your number GCF there would be 1, but you can't take an S from both of these. So you can go ahead and factor that out, an S then. And so yeah, the only thing you can factor out from both of those two is like a 1s. So you can factor out the s. So s times what gives you 5s? So that'd have to be 5. And then s times what gives you -2s squared? So that'd be -2s. And then now that you've factored this here, it'll be kind of like we did this first one up here. So you can set your two factors equal to 0. So you can set your first factor equal to 0, which is kind of already done for you because you'll have s equals 0 for that one. And then you can do your other one here. So this one. So then for your second one, so that's 5 minus 2s equals 0. And then you're just going to solve this one. S equals 0 is already solved for you. But then you're solving this two-step equation then. So you'll solve for the s here. So you can cancel the 5 or the 2s. I'll do the 2s here just to keep things positive. So you'll have 5 equals 2s. And then you're solving for s here. So they're multiplying by 2, so you can divide by 2 to get the s. And then if you divide, you'll get 2.5, but I'm just going to leave it as an improper fraction here. So I'll just leave it as 5/2 for solution. So this one has 2 roots. That means it would touch the x-axis twice. So cross at 0 and then at 5/2, so it would be like 2.5. And then for your next one here, so remember, you want all your terms on the same side here, which means you're trying to cancel the 24m. So you have to subtract it since it's positive, and you want it over there with all of the other two terms. So you can subtract 24m. That way you have a 0 there like you want. And so it can't go with any of these. I'm going to put the -24m in the middle, just so it's in your regular form for the trinomials there. So this is a trinomial here now that you've moved your 24m over there. So this is where you're doing a times c. So 144 times 1. So any factors of 144 that add to be -24. So for this one here, so you have to have two negatives because you're trying to multiply to get a positive and add to be a negative. So you need two factors of 144 that are negative that would add to be -24. So here it'd have to be -12 and -12 because that would multiply to be 144 and then add to be -24. So each of your factors would be -12 there. And then the coefficient of your x squared, well, here it's m, but the coefficient of your x squared term is 1, so you can use the shortcut. So your first factor will be m minus 12. And then your second one will be the same thing. And then to get your final solution here, so then you're setting each of your factors equal to 0. So I'll set my first one equal to 0 here. So you can have this equals 0. And then you'll have your other one then. And then you can solve each of these for the m. So that will cancel out there. So you have m equals 12 for this one. And then you can solve this one here for the m. So you can add the 12 here too. So you'll have m equals 12 for this one then. So for this one, so each of your two solutions was the same here. So really you'll just only need one of these here, which this means if your solution's m equals 12, that means if you were to graph it, so this means it would touch way down here at 12 and then come right back up. This is called a double root because it would touch and then come back up because it wouldn't cross it twice. So that would be your only solution for that one then. And then for this next one here, so like the others, remember you'll want to make sure everything's on the same side to start. So you'll have to cancel out this 6 over here. So you should subtract the 6 to start then. So this will cancel. That we have a 0. And you'll have to subtract 6 from the negative 18 because they were your constants there. They're like terms. They can go together. So negative 18 minus 6 would be negative 24. And then after that, so you could do a times c if you want with the trinomial, although if you factor out a 6, this would be a lot easier here. So factor out a 6 from these three terms then. So 6 times n squared would give you your first term. And then 6 times negative 3n would give you your second one, then minus 4 for the last one. Remember, you can ignore the 6 for now. So you'll do a times c. So negative 4 times 1. So you'll need factors of negative 4 that add to give you negative 3. So I need a positive and negative. So there you have to use negative 4 and positive 1 because they would multiply to negative 4 and then add to give you the negative 3. And then the coefficient ones, you can use your shortcut way. So one of your factors will be n minus 4, and then your other one will be n plus 1. And then remember your 6 is still up front, so you can stick it back out there. And then you're just going to set each of your factors equal to 0. So you're going to have this one, and then first. So this is 6 equals 0 you would have, but really that can't happen at all. So pretty much you can ignore that. It's not going to help you get a solution at all. You'll just have the other two. You'll just have two solutions there. So you can set your first factor equal to 0 then there. So n minus 4 equals 0 and then solve. And then you'll have your other one. So you can subtract 1 there. So you'll have negative 1 for one of your solutions or roots. And then you can solve your equation here. So you'll have to add 4 then. So this will be 4 once you add those together. So that means you have two solutions or roots there. So across, add 4 and then negative 1 there. Okay, I'm going to move this stuff so I have more room for the next one. So for your next term here, you're going to want to make sure all your terms are on the same side first, but you don't, so you're going to need to FOIL the left side out here because you're going to have to refactor this other stuff once you move the 5 over. But you're going to FOIL the left side here first. Remember for that, so you'll do 2x times 3x then. So that'd be 6x squared. And then you can do 2x times the 1. So that'd be 2x. So you did 2x times each of those two. So now I can do 3 times each of those. So 3 times 3x would be 9x. And then 3 times the 1, so 3. And then you have equals 5 there. And then you can combine your like terms here, the 2x and the 9x. So that'd be 11x. And then you also want all your terms on the left. So you should subtract the 5 here. That way this will cancel out and you'll have a 0 here. And you'll have to subtract it from the 3. So you'll have negative 2 there then. I'll just bring this stuff down. I was trying to skip stuff. Okay. Then you have plus 3 equals 5. And then you should subtract the 5 because you want everything on the same side then. So 6x squared plus 11x. And then you'll have negative 2 there equals 0. And then you have a trinomial here. So 6x squared plus 11x minus 2. So that's when you can do a times c. So 6 times negative 2. So that'd be negative 12. So you'll need factors in negative 12 that would add to the 11 there. So you'll need a positive and a negative because that would multiply to be a negative. So there you'll have to use positive 12 and negative 1 because they would multiply to be negative 12 and then add to be positive 11x there. And then so the coefficient of your x squared term is 6. So you can't use the shortcuts. And you can sub these two factors in next. So plus 12x minus 1x. And then you're grouping your first two terms. So 6x squared plus 12x. So your number GCF for both those would be a 6. And you can take an x from the first two terms also. So you factor out 6x. And then you're filling in the parentheses. So 6x times x will give you 6x squared. And then 6x times 2 will give you the 12x. And then you can group your last two terms there. So negative 1x minus 2. So your number GCF there would be 1, but you want two positives inside the parentheses because remember, they have to match each other, which you don't have two positives there. So you'll factor out negative 1. That way the signs will switch. So you'll factor out negative 1 there. And the negative 1 times positive x will give you negative 1x. And the negative 1 times positive 2 will give you the negative 2 there. It still equals 0 there. And then you'll write this the short way. So one of your factors will be 6x minus 1. And then your other one will be x plus 2. Because remember, those match and you're just bringing 1 down. Equals 0. And then for your last step here, so then since this is factored now, then you can set each of your factors equal to 0 to get your two solutions here. So I'll do the first one. So you'll have this one. So you'll have 6x minus 1 equals 0, and then you'll have your other one there. So let's do this one first. So then you can just solve this equation. So you can add your 1 because you're solving for the x there. So you'll have 6x equals 1, and then you'll have to divide by the 6 then. So that would be 1/6 for this one then. And then you can set your other factor equal to 0. So then you have x plus 2 equals 0. So you can just subtract your 2 then. So you have x equals negative 2. So those would be your two solutions there. So 1/6 and then negative 2. And then for number 7, this one will kind of start off the same way as the one you just did here. So you have to FOIL the left side here before you can move these other two terms over. So you'll do x times 4x first there. So if you multiply those, then you'll have 4x squared then. And then you'll do x times the 1. So that'd be 1x then. And then you're doing negative 5 times the 4x. That'd be negative 20x. And then you have negative 5 times the positive 1. So that'd be negative 5. And then you have that still over there. So negative 23x plus 30. And then you have these like terms in the middle you should combine x. You're doing 1x minus 20x. That'd be negative 19x then. This is all number 7. The problem is just long. And then you want all your terms on the same side, so you should cancel out these two terms here. So you can add your 23x and then subtract the 30. Then you can subtract the 30, which will come from the negative 5 then. So you'll have 4x squared plus 4x and then minus 35. And then after that, so now that you have all your terms on the same side, this is a trinomial here, so you're going to do 8 times c next. So negative 35 times 4. So if you multiply those, you'll get negative 140. So you'll need factors of negative 140 that would add to give you the 4x. So you'll need a positive and a negative there, so you'll have to use positive 14 and then negative 10 as the factors, because they would multiply to be negative 140 and then add to be 4. So then you can sub those two terms in, the 14x and the negative 10x then. And then you can group your first two terms and the last two terms. So the 4x squared plus 14x. So 4x and 14x, so your number GCF for those two would be a 2. And you can take an x from both of your first two terms also. So just be a 2x you factor out there, and then you can fill in your parentheses. So you're figuring out 2x times what will give you the 4x squared. So that'd be another 2x. And then 2x times what gives you positive 14x. So that'd be positive 7. And then you can group your last two terms there too. So you have negative 10x minus 35. So your GCF for those two would be a 5, but you want two positives in there, so you'll have to factor in a negative 5. That way the signs will change. And then remember your parentheses have to match the other. So negative 5 times positive 2x will give you the negative 10x. And then negative 5 times a positive 7 will give you the negative 35. And then you can write in the short way. So you'll have 2x minus 5 as one of your factors, and then 2x plus 7 for the other one. And then to your final answer here, so then you can just, so now this is factored, so you can just set each of your factors equal to 0 in the end. So one will be 2x minus 5 equals 0. And your other one will be 2x plus 7 equals 0. So I'll solve this one first. So you can subtract the, so you're solving for the x. You can cancel either one, I'll just do the 7. So you have 2x equals negative 7, and then you can divide by your 2 there. And it'll just stay as a fraction. So this would be x equals negative 7 halves. And then you can do the same thing with this one here. So you can solve this two-step equation. So I'll cancel out your minus 5, so you can add 5 then. you have 2x equals 5 then. And then you can divide by your 2. So that would be 5/2 then for your second solution. So those would be your two solutions there then. And then for the very last one here, I'm going to erase all this so we have more room. So for this one, for the last one here, you have for your last one here, so you have 3x minus 1, quantity squared equals 8x plus 9. So you'll want all your terms on the same side, but for the first one, you have 3x minus 1 squared. So for this, you're going to multiply by itself. So I'm going to write it out like this first. So you're doing 3x minus 1 times itself again, like that. So you'll FOIL this side out like you did on the other one. So do 3x times 3x first. So that'd be 9x squared. And then you can multiply 3x times the negative 1. So that'd be negative 3x. And then, so you did first outer, now you're doing inner. So negative 1 times the 3x, so negative 3x. And then your last two terms together. So negative 1 times negative 1 would be positive 1. And then you still have this stuff there. And then you have the like terms in the middle, the negative 3x minus 3x. That'd be, once you combine them, you'll have negative 6x there. And then, so you want all your terms on the same side. That way you can factor it there. So you should cancel your 8x and the 9. So you'll have to subtract both because they're positive. So you can subtract the 8x. So it'll have to come from the negative 6x. And then you can subtract the 9, which will come from the 1 because those are your constants. So negative 6x minus 8x, that'd be negative 14x. And then you have positive 1 minus 9, so that'd be negative 8 there. And then you'll factor the left side here. And so you have a trinomial with your 3 terms here. So that means you're doing 8 times c. So you're doing negative 8 times 9. So you'll need factors of negative 72 there that would add to give you negative 14. So you'll need a positive and a negative there because you're trying to multiply to be a negative and then add to give you a negative. So for that one, you'll have to use positive 4 and then negative 18. Because they would multiply to be negative 72 and then they would add to be negative 14. So you can sub them in there. Doesn't really matter what goes first. I'll just sub the 4x in. So you'll have plus 4x minus 18x. And then you can group your first two terms and then your last two. So you're grouping 9x squared and then they're 4x. So your number GCF for those two terms would just be a 1 because you have 9 and 4 and there's nothing else that goes into them. But you can take on an x from both of those two terms. That's what you should do there. So you can factor on an x. And then you can fill in your parentheses. So x times 9x would give you 9x squared. And then you're figuring out x times what gives you the 4x. That'd be plus 4. And then you're grouping your last two terms. So negative 18x minus 8. So for those two, so your number GCF would be 2, because that's the greatest number that would go into both of those. But remember, you want your parentheses to match. You have to have two positives in there, so these aren't the right signs. So factor out negative 2. That way the signs will match like you want. And you can't take anything else out with a negative 2 there. And then you can fill in your parentheses. So you're figuring out negative 2 times what gives you negative 18x. That'd be positive 9x. And then negative 2 times what gives you the negative 8. So that'd be positive 4. And that way it matches this also. And then you're going to write this the short way now. So one of your factors would be x minus 2, and then your other would be 9x plus 4, because these match, and you're just bringing one of them down there. And then you still have your equals 0 there. And then, so now this is factored, so then you can set each of these factors equal to 0 to get your solutions in the end. So you can set your first one equal to 0, so you'll have x minus 2 equals 0. And then you can solve this one-step equation for x, or you should just add 2 to cancel the minus 2 then. So you have x equals 2 for one of your solutions then. And then you can set your other equation equal to 0. So you can do 9x plus 4 equals 0. And then you can solve this two-step equation. So it doesn't really matter what you can solve first. I'll do the 4 here. So you can subtract 4 then. So you have 9x equals negative 4. And then to solve for x, then they're multiplied by 9, so then you want to divide by 9 to cancel it out. So that would be your other solution then, so negative 4/9. And then, so that's all there. So what you're working on today is a mix of these types of problems you learned about today. So just make sure you look back as to what type of problem it is, as to how you would start solving it, because these are kind of similar when you like FOIL out the left side, although some like the front, there's less work to do. So just make sure you like reference the same type of problem there. But I can help you if you get stuck with anything, if you get stuck on anything though. And so you're doing a Google Doc, but if you would rather like take a picture in some of your answers, that works too.